Okay, so question 8 says, study the following extract which was written for 2 violins, and then identify the intervals between the parts that are highlighted. You should include both the intervals number, example 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc., and type, major, minor, augmented, diminished, etc. So let's have a look at these. I like interval questions. They're quite relaxing to have a look at and quite straightforward often as well. So what do we have here? Well, in the first question we have an interval between a C sharp. So it's really important, obviously, again, always to look at the key signature to make sure that we're completely clear as to the type of interval that we're sort of working with here. And so we've got a C sharp down below and an A above. Now there's lots of ways of working out intervals. You can do it by counting semitones. You can do it by working out whether the note belongs in the major scale or minor scale. I'll do a few different ones with each of these questions, and then hopefully one of those will be a system that works well for you. The first thing to do before we worry about whether it's a major, minor, perfect, diminished, augmented type of intervals, we just need to work out what size of interval are we dealing with here. And the way we do that is just simply counting through letter names. So it doesn't matter whether they're sharps, flats, naturals, all of that doesn't matter at this point. All we care about is how many letters, counting the bottom and the top, do we have to count through to get from C to A. So starting on a C, C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, and A is 6, which means that interval 1 has to be some kind of 6th. So that is dead easy. Now one way we can work out whether we're dealing with a major 6th or a minor 6th or an augmented 6th or a diminished 6th is to just look at the major scale and ask ourselves, does this A appear in the major scale? Now this is not necessarily the best approach in this case, just because C sharp major is maybe not a scale you have on the tip of your tongue all the time, but what you can do is look at the bottom note of the interval and say, well, does the top note belong in the major scale of the bottom note? So I'm asking here, does A belong in the scale of C sharp major? And the answer is no, it doesn't. So C sharp major has loads and loads of sharps in the key signature. In fact, I think it has all the sharps. And so we don't have an A natural, we have an A sharp, which means that this interval is 1 semitone smaller than a major 6th. If it was an A sharp, that note does fit in the scale and does appear in the scale of C sharp major, so we would call that a major 6th. Because it's 1 semitone smaller, A is a semitone lower than A sharp, we're going to call this a minor 6th. Another way you could have worked that out would be to count the semitones between C sharp and A, and each interval has a different number of semitones. That's another way of doing it as well. So there's lots of ways of approaching these. This one's much more straightforward. So this is a D, and this is an F natural. So first of all, we're going to work out what number interval is this. D, E, F is dead easy. So there's only 3 steps counting the bottom and the top. So this is some kind of third. The next thing to ask yourself, well, let's do semitone counting in this case. So counting semitone steps from D to F natural, 1 semitone step gets us a D sharp, another semitone step gets us to E, and another semitone step gets us to F. So that's 3 semitone steps from D to F natural. And if we do 3 semitone steps in a third, that's going to be a minor third. If we do 4 semitone steps, it's a major third. Another way we could do that, again, similar process to before, just ask ourselves the question, does F natural belong in the scale of D major? And if you know your circle of fifths and your key signatures and your scales and all that cool stuff, you'll know that D major has a key signature of 2 sharps. In fact, it's the key signature at the beginning of this extract. But the key signature is telling us that actually D major has an F sharp in it. So if we go 1 semitone smaller, because the natural sign makes the distance between the 2 notes 1 semitone smaller than it should be, here it's going to be a minor third instead of a major third. Okay, all good so far. The next 2 notes are a B and a D sharp. So this is, again, some kind of third, because if we count through our letters B, C, D, we'll get our third. And we can do our is this in the major scale thing. In B major, we've got 5 sharps in the key signature, F, C, G, D, A, Yeah, that's it. F, C, G, D, and A. And because it's got a D sharp, so that note does belong. This is a D sharp that does belong in the scale of B. So this must be a major third. So all good so far. Okay, next question. Oh, interesting. So what's interesting here is that our top note and bottom note are kind of reversed, in that the top part has gone down and the part above here has gone up. Doesn't really matter. We're just going to imagine them slightly the other way around. But this is still the lower note. So this is the lower note now. And this is the upper note. So this is an F sharp. So how many letters do we have to count through to go from A down here to F up here? Well, it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F. So another kind of sixth. So it seems to be just doing thirds and sixths. Interesting. Well, that's not surprising, actually, because if you're writing two parts together, a lot of the time you're going to want to have thirds and sixths between your two parts. And so asking the same question as before, does F sharp belong in the scale of A major? Yes, it does. So the key signature for A is 3 sharps. So as a result, we're going to call this a major sixth. And finally, we just want to do interval 5, which is quite interesting now because the distance has got quite big between the D down here and the G all the way up there. So the second part is way high and the first part is way low, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to be exactly the same. We've got a D here and we've got a G here. So if we're counting up, ignoring the distance of the octave, because we can do that, ignoring the fact that there's an octave extra added into this interval, how many steps do we have to count up to go from a D to a G? Well, that's 4, D, E, F, G. So this is some kind of fourth. And then we just have to work out whether this is a perfect fourth, because we don't have major fourths. We never talk about major fourths. We have perfect fourths, augmented fourths, and diminished fourths. So the way we work out which one it is, we're going to look at D, which is the lowest note, and ask, does G belong in the major scale of D, because D is the lowest note and G is the highest note. So it does. The key signature for D is 2 sharps again, and so we just need to work out, is G in that scale? Yes, it is. So this is a perfect fourth, and because there's that octave leap, we're just going to put in that it's a compound perfect fourth, and all compound means is that it's a perfect fourth plus an octave, because if we listen to those two notes together, they'll have approximately the same sound as a normal perfect fourth interval. So the octave just adds a bit of extra space, but really the sound that those two notes will make when they're played together is basic. Well, it's a similar thing. It's not exactly the same, but they have a relationship, so it's worth considering them to be kind of two flavours of the same thing. Anyway, that's our intervals dealt with. We dealt with those relatively straightforwardly. Now we get to be a bit creative in the next question. We're going to compose something for flute or violin, so I'm sure you're incredibly excited to see what I write in the next question, so I will see you for question 9 in a moment.